This installment is an absolute powerhouse of nation building. Niu Wei's chilling dispatch from the north paints a grim picture. Those cannibals are a persistent shadow, and it's unnervingly plausible how the Han's own strength might be inadvertently fueling their desperation elsewhere. Yet juxtaposed with this is the sheer electrifying triumph of the Qimingxing Lighthouse igniting the night. The meticulous detail of its construction, the ingenious projection tech, and the acetylene lamp mechanics are a total delight for anyone who loves seeing problems brilliantly solved. It's not just a beacon, it's a blazing declaration of Han ingenuity. What truly captivates me is how every new development, from decentralized textile industries creating specialized fabrics to the tangible impact of carbide lamps on daily life, feels so organically woven into their meteoric rise. They aren't just conquering, they're crafting a new world, innovation by innovation. With Yu Fu's impending return, the wary Niu Wei observing their every miracle, and even new ventures like bottled baijiu on the horizon, the Han's ascent is becoming a fascinatingly complex game of brilliance and delicate balance. Accompanying. View by boat to Waishan Prefecture, Niu Wei's heart was a maelstrom of emotions. Although he had only spent a year in the Han tribe, what he had seen and heard in that year was enough to make his little heart tremble. The Han tribe's development speed was simply like riding a rocket. When he had first arrived a year ago, Niu Wei was still poring over books at the Hanyang City School and could only light a tung oil lamp when he went home. Back then, he even pondered how sophisticated this thing was, wondering where the oil came from. It certainly couldn't be the animal fat he was familiar with. Who would be willing to use edible oil for lighting? In his tribe, if they needed light at night, it was either torches or bonfires. What on earth was a lamp? They had absolutely no concept of it. But now, gazing at the dazzling beam of light shooting from the towering lighthouse before him, Niu Wei felt as if he'd taken an arrow to the knee. He hadn't even fully figured out his own oil lamp, and here they were, already using carbide lamps. That thing was even more incredible. Toss in a few broken stones, add some cool water, and it could blind you with its brightness. What these carbide lamps brought wasn't just a technological gap. Niu Wei, however, had figured out some of the finer points that even some local Han tribe members hadn't considered. A single lamp had, out of thin air, bought the Han tribe a huge amount of development time. Previously, once it got dark, nothing could be done. Now, with carbide lamps, the Han tribe could be active for an extra 4 hours at night. 4 hours a day over a year. Wouldn't that mean they had almost half a year more than the Xin Tribe? During these 4 hours, the Han tribe wouldn't organize collective overtime, but when distributed among each household, the uses were vast. Women could use the evening to stitch a couple more pairs of shoe soles or sew a couple more garments. Men could also bind a few more brooms or weave a few more baskets. A young couple setting up a stall at the night market to sell some snacks could earn a few extra copper coins. School children could at least spend an extra hour poring over their books than usual. Adding it all up, the Han tribe's overall development was flooring the accelerator, a speed that made Niu Wei's scalp tingle. See that? That's the lighthouse. You stood on the watchtower of Waishan Prefecture's city wall, patting Niu Wei's shoulder beside you. By next year at the latest, we'll have to stick one up on the northeast corner of our bamboo island too. If your Xin Tribe wants one at Dark Bridge, just have your great chieftain give our envoy a shout, and we guarantee we'll help, Shai. We knew perfectly well that the Han tribe wasn't that kind-hearted. If they really helped build a lighthouse, the price would definitely not be small. Besides, his Xin Tribe didn't even have a decent boat. What good would a lighthouse be to them? Even if it were built, it would just be lighting the way for the Han tribe. He wasn't stupid. Chief Han, our Xin Tribe has no boats right now, so a lighthouse wouldn't be very useful. But if you could sell us those civilian carbide lamps, our great chieftain would be overjoyed. If you could also sell us the technology to make the lamps, that would be even more wonderful. Niu Wei ventured tentatively. Civilian carbide lamps were much more practical than lighthouses. If the Xin Tribe could popularize them, their development speed at least wouldn't be left too far behind. Well, selling the lamps is no problem. You shifted your tone. But the technology to make them, no. It's not that I'm stingy, it's just that this technology is too advanced. At your Xin Tribe's current level, even if I slapped the blueprints on your face, you wouldn't be able to make them. Never mind anything else. Just the sheet iron for the lamp casing would stump you. You can't even smelt iron, so what's the use of me telling you? You glanced at Niu Wei, saw his mouth move as if to retort, and quickly delivered another blow. Don't tell me you can smelt copper. Copper can't be used for carbide lamps. We've tried it. It explodes. It's precisely because copper sheets don't work that we switched to iron. Put calcium carbide in a copper casing and bang, it explodes. You were spouting nonsense, clearly taking advantage of Niu Wei being an honest fellow who didn't understand chemistry. Niu Wei felt incredibly frustrated. This was blatant disdain. But he couldn't refute what you said. It was an ironclad fact that the Xin Tribe couldn't smelt iron. Without the raw materials, having the technology would be useless anyway. Import materials from the Han Tribe and assemble them themselves. Wouldn't that make them suckers? Given the Han Tribe's outstanding character, they'd probably sell the materials for more than the finished lamps. Having been bluntly rebuffed by you, Niu Wei couldn't insist further and had to settle for the next best thing. Chief Han, since we can't make the carbide lamps, buying them from the Han Tribe is fine. But the calcium carbide inside is a consumable. Constantly buying it from the Han Tribe, with a round trip taking several months, is too much hassle. Do you think you could sell us the technology to make calcium carbide? We're willing to pay a high price. You smiled, and instead of answering, directly posed a question. That's not entirely out of the question, but making calcium carbide requires a lot of coal. Does your bamboo island have coal? If it does, I don't mind selling you the technology. Coal? Niu Wei was dumbfounded. What new word was this now? It's something similar to charcoal, can be burned as fuel, but it's a natural black stone that burns once you dig it up. Just think of it as a stone version of charcoal, you explained. Niu Wei frowned deeply. He really didn't know if Bamboo Island had this treasure. At least they definitely hadn't had it before, or they would have used it long ago. This coal? I'm really not sure, but I hope Chief Han can help pass a message to our great chieftain, asking him to send people to look for it. If Bamboo Island really does have coal, I hope Chief Han will sell us the method for making calcium carbide. Of course, I keep my word, honest with young and old alike, you said, waving your hand dismissively. Fat chance Bamboo Island had coal. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to mine it within 2 or 3 years. After 2 or 3 years, whether Bamboo Island would belong to the Han or the Xin would be anyone's guess. Therefore, you agreed with such alacrity. The matter of the carbide lamps was thus temporarily settled. Niu Wei then asked if he could trade for the Han Tribe's oil extraction technology. To this you readily agreed. But when Niu Wei asked what to trade for it, you said you wanted large quantities of wheat and white salt. White salt wasn't a big deal for the Xin Tribe, but wheat was a headache. The Xin Tribe's staple food was corn. They didn't even know what wheat was. They would have to import seeds from the Han Tribe, grow it, and then sell it back to the Han Tribe. It sounded fine on the surface, but Niu Wei couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Why does it have to be wheat? Can't we trade corn instead? Niu Wei asked, both curious and puzzled. You shook your head. Corn won't do. Firstly, our Han Tribe people aren't used to eating it. Secondly, it doesn't store well. I want wheat purely to stockpile more grain for the tribe. Unhusked wheat can be stored for 5 or 6 years. You can also grow more of it on Bamboo Island. Even if you don't sell it to us, it's no loss to store it for yourselves. Niu Wei nodded thoughtfully, feeling there was nothing wrong with it. You were the Han Tribe's chief. Wanting to store more grain was perfectly normal, and the reason was quite reasonable. He slightly lowered his guard and nodded in agreement. But what you said was half truth, half lie. Wanting to store grain was true, but insisting on wheat was pure deception. The Han Tribe had more rice than they could eat each year, and that stuff could also be stored for several years. no worse than wheat. Your little scheme was to create a food crisis for the Xin Tribe. Because among the Han Tribe's current staple, grains, wheat had the lowest yield. When the time came, if Bamboo Island switched all its corn to wheat, forget selling it to the Han Tribe. It was doubtful whether they'd have enough to fill the gaps between their own teeth. Chief Han, we need to buy too many things from the Han Tribe. Grain, white salt. I'm worried our Xin Tribe won't be able to bear the burden. Do you think we could add something else to the exchange? Niu Wei pondered and asked again. Trading entirely with grain and white salt, the pressure on the Xin Tribe would be immense. That's easy to solve. You waved your hand magnanimously, continuing to dig a pit for him. We also buy paper at a high price. Doesn't your Xin Tribe have bamboo in abundance? I can have our envoy pass on the technology for making bamboo paper to you. You use your local bamboo to make paper, then sell it to us. We'll buy as much as you can produce. That should work, right? When Niu Wei heard this, it was like joy falling from heaven. Bamboo paper was a great thing. The raw material covered the mountains and plains. The more you cut, the faster it grew. Moreover, the price of paper in the Han Tribe had always been high. If the Xin Tribe could truly mass-produce paper, perhaps they could actually achieve a balance of trade and stop being constantly fleeced, it saw. It was perfectly normal for Niu Wei to think this way. Currently, the trade between the Han and Xin tribes was practically an unequal treaty. The Han Tribe held advanced technology, completely crushing the Xin Tribe in every technological aspect. The result was that the Han Tribe could casually offer some high-end goods and trade them for large quantities of the Xin Tribe's basic resources, like low-value items such as grain and white salt, which the Xin could only sustain by offering sheer volume. If things continued like this, the Xin Tribe would sooner or later be hollowed out. That's why Niu Wei wondered if the Xin Tribe could also produce some high-value added goods to trade equally with the Han Tribe. Bamboo paper seemed like the perfect choice. Niu Wei, having studied in the Han Tribe, deeply understood the demand for in value of paper, so he didn't suspect for a moment that you were setting him up. The reason you made this proposal was that, while it seemed to be for the Xin Tribe's benefit on the surface, the Han Tribe actually stood to gain even more. Firstly, the Han Tribe itself didn't have enough paper. The demand was huge. Letting the Xin Tribe make paper could alleviate their own paper shortage. Secondly, from a technical standpoint, traditional papermaking was a time-consuming and laborious task, a labor-intensive industry. If the Xin Tribe really went all out with papermaking, they would have to invest a massive amount of manpower and time. This was your attrition tactic. Spending so much manpower, resources, and time to produce paper that couldn't be eaten or worn would only severely slow down the Xin Tribe's development, even affecting their normal production and daily life. In this way, wouldn't your little objective be achieved? The two of them stood side by side on the city wall, gazing at the distant lighthouse, each with their own little schemes brewing in their minds, both pondering how to squeeze a bit more profit from the other. A few days passed in a flash. Yu Fu didn't keep you waiting long. On the 3rd day of the 9th month, the pioneer fleet he led finally reached its destination, Waishan Prefecture docks. Seeing the imposing lighthouse next to the docks, Yu Fu was also taken aback. He hadn't expected that in the short time he'd been away. The chief had managed to erect such a colossal structure. Moreover, the bustling scene at Waishan Prefecture docks nearly made his eyeballs pop out. At the docks, coke and coal transported from Lakehart Island were being continuously unloaded onto the shore. A specially designed ore-loading berth was particularly eye-catching. On an ordinary wooden jetty stood an exaggeratedly large wooden gantry crane. The crane was fitted with 2 large hoppers, and its operation was like a magic trick. First, an empty hopper was lowered by pulleys and ropes onto a ship to be filled, then hoisted back to the shore in reverse. 4-wheeled freight wagons were already waiting on the shore. A switch at the bottom of the hopper would open, and coke would pour with a clatter automatically into the wagon bed. This loading and unloading efficiency was simply off the charts. At the general cargo berths on the other side, there were similar gantry cranes, but instead of hoppers, They lifted an automatic four-pronged grappling hook. Whether it was barrels, boxes, or sacks, as soon as the hook was placed on the cargo and lifted, the prongs would automatically tighten. Once on shore, as the cargo touched the ground, the prongs would automatically release. It was incredibly convenient for loading and unloading ship cargo. The only drawback was that it couldn't handle bulk cargo. Items had to be packaged in boxes, barrels, or sacks. However, for the well-resourced Han tribe, this was clearly not an issue. None of these contraptions had even been a shadow of a thought when Yu Fu left, so he couldn't help but be dumbstruck. Yu Fu pays his respects to the chief, the pioneer. Fleet has fortunately not failed its mission, and has finally completed the task of opening up the sea routes. We've also brought back many good things from the coast, things our Han tribe doesn't have, specially brought for the chief to try. Seeing you had come specially with a group of people to welcome him, Yu Fu felt incredibly pleased, but he didn't dare get too carried away and quickly took the initiative to salute. Quickly, rise, rise. Yu personally pulled Yu Fu up, then made a gesture of helping the other disembarking soldiers up. You've endured wind, sun, and rain on your journey, gone for nearly half a year. It has truly been hard work. Soldiers, rest assured, upon your return from this expedition, everyone has merits. Later, have your commander report your achievements, and then each of you go claim your rewards. All of you rise. A welcome banquet has already been prepared for you in the city. A chief's dignity and etiquette still had to be maintained. After all, this Han etiquette was something you yourself had concocted. Many thanks to the chief for bestowing this banquet. As soon as his voice fell, Yu Fu, as the commander, once again led everyone in a salute. This simple, triumphal ceremony was thus successfully concluded. At the banquet in Weishan Prefecture, dozens of 8 immortals' tables were packed together. Not a single one of the brothers who had returned with Yu Fu was left out. Everyone had a seat. This was a reward. At the head table, you sat firmly in the main seat, with Yunji and Yu Fu to your left and right, like 2 door gods. Below them sat the 4 captains of the pioneer fleet, plus Niu Wei, the business representative from the Xin Tribe. Come, come. Everyone try our Han tribe's new white liquor. Yunji cheerfully held up a sparkling glass wine bottle. Brewed from sorghum and yeast, then distilled, purified, and blended. It's much more fragrant than that old rice wine. But it's also much stronger, so take it easy. Sip a small mouthful first, otherwise, if you spit it out in front of the chief. That would be a real loss of face, ha ha ha. As Yunji spoke, he filled everyone's glasses. This white liquor was unique to his jurisdiction. Other prefectures and counties wanted a taste? No way. How could he not be proud? A captain sitting next to Yunji was particularly observant. Seeing Yunji finish pouring for the chief and Yu Fu, he deftly took the bottle and refilled everyone's glasses in turn. With such a sensible subordinate, Yunji beamed, his eyes crinkling, and even nodded at the captain, indicating his satisfaction. Yu Fu, Niu Wei, and the others, however, were staring at the glass wine bottles and cups in front of them, their mouths agape enough to fit an egg. This was the first time they had ever seen such crystal-clear glassware. Yu Fu, in particular, sensed something unusual. The chief was willing to use glass for these things, which meant the Han tribe had already mastered the technology for mass-producing cheap glass, at least much cheaper than the previously polished crystal. And this liquor. Although the Han tribe's alcohol production wasn't high, Yu Fu had drunk his fair share. When he went out to sea, the chief would always let him take some. But what he drank back then was all rice wine, brewed from rice, as cloudy as rice soup, with an alcohol content of only 3 or 4%. This was the first time he had seen liquor as clear as plain water. However, he certainly didn't dare gulp it down like plain water. The distinct, sharp aroma of alcohol could be smelled from a distance. Come, let's raise our glasses. Seeing everyone's glasses were full, you were the first to raise your cup. Congratulations to the pioneer fleet on their triumphant return, and may the friendship between our Han and Xin tribes last forever. Thank you, Chief, for the wine. Everyone responded to the call, carefully taking a small sip. The next second, a chorus of hissing and gasping sounds erupted around the tables. Some people's faces instantly turned as red as a monkey's bottom. Some kept sucking in sharp breaths, and others had their mouths open, shouting, "Spicy, spicy." You, however, remained calm. You smiled as you watched the embarrassment of this group of drunkards. You didn't know the exact proof of this liquor, but based on the taste, it was at least around 40% alcohol, considered a medium-strength white liquor. It didn't feel like much to you. Half a caddy or 8 taels of this kind of liquor was a piece of cake for your current self. But for others tasting this high-proof liquor for the first time, it was quite an ordeal. The expressions of the people at your table were practically identical, holding their breath, feeling as if their noses were spouting fire. The mellow white liquor slid down their throats into their stomachs, and instantly, it felt like a fire had been lit in their bellies. Yu Fu circulated his qi, forcefully suppressing the kick of the alcohol, and was the first to comment, "Chief, this liquor is mellow and fragrant, and the liquid is as clear as water, but its kick, it's fierce. Like drinking fire, it warms the whole body. Drinking it in winter would surely be even more invigorating. Indeed, this strong liquor is best for warming up in winter. It's best to drink less of it usually. Drinking too much can lead to drunkenness and interfere with important matters." You first nodded in agreement, then gave everyone a gentle reminder. Alcohol can accelerate blood circulation, and scientifically speaking, it does indeed warm the body. There's nothing wrong with that. But getting drunk and misbehaving was not a good thing. It harms the liver and delays work, so a preemptive warning was necessary. Everyone had a few more sips with their food, and the atmosphere livened up. Yu Fu took the opportunity to bring up his suggestions regarding navigation again. "Chief, if we want to develop maritime transport in the future, we must research new ships. The ships our pioneer fleet used this time aren't quite up to par. Encountering storms at sea is too risky. On our first voyage out, we ran into a violent storm halfway. The bulwarks were too low, and the waves crashed onto the deck one after another, nearly smashing our ship to pieces. Moreover, our ships have a shallow draft, so when the waves are big, they toss about like chaff in a sieve. The cabin design isn't wave-proof either. That day, a huge wave hit us and directly flooded the cabin. All the charcoal was soaked. For several days afterwards, until we reached Bamboo Island, we didn't have a single hot meal, surviving entirely on dry rations and cold water. Thinking back now, it was truly too dangerous," Yu Fu lamented, pouring out his experiences and lessons learned at sea like beans from a bag, also intending to offer you some ideas for improvement, telling you which areas were not suitable for braving the waves. However, you had actually already mulled over these problems Yu Fu mentioned. Improvements were easy, but there was no spare time for them now. In any case, the current trade volume with the Xin Tribe wasn't large, and using those larger ships to tide things over temporarily was sufficient. It wouldn't be too late to develop specialized seagoing vessels in a year or two. "So, you said, we can't attend to the improvement of seagoing vessels for now. Next time you go out, use the 3-masted large ships as replacements. We won't need many anyway. As for what you mentioned in your letter about needing a large number of sea fishing boats, I've already designed a new type of ship." You paused, then continued. "It's a small boat, 20 meters long, with both 2-masted and single-masted models. It has a deeper draft, a rounded bow and stern, and both the bow and stern are hollow. This allows it to rise easily in large waves, giving it better wave-piercing performance. The hold is also designed with flipboard watertight compartments, which can separately store different catches of fish. However, to transport the fish catch from the coast to here, there are currently only 3 feasible methods. One is to salt and dry them into dried fish. Another is to process them into canned seafood. And the third is to transport them refrigerated with ice. This last one is more troublesome, and can only be considered next year or the year after." Hearing you say this, Yu Fu was initially a little disappointed. He had thought the chief would continue to develop even larger ships, but instead it was just a 20-meter small fry. He had been planning to go after that big fellow on the next voyage, but now it seemed unlikely. However, when he heard you say that the coastal fish catch could be transported back, his attention was instantly recaptured. Chief, I understand dried salted fish, but what are those canned goods and ice chilling? Can you tell us about them? Yu Fu asked like a curious child. Canned goods, well, it's about sealing cooked fish, meat, and broth together in jars. Because air is excluded, they can be preserved for a longer time. A few months should be no problem. As for ice chilling, you should be quite familiar with during winter. Even if you throw fresh meat directly outside because it's cold, the meat will freeze solid and won't spoil all winter. Ice chilling works on the same principle. We can cut ice from the lake in winter, cut it into ice bricks, and store them in underground ice houses. Then, in the summer, we can take the ice bricks out from the cellar by lining the ship's hold with ice and then cleaning and throwing the caught fish directly onto the ice pile. We can also prevent the fish meat from spoiling. The advantage of doing this is that we can eat fresh seafood, but there are also drawbacks, such as our place being too far from the coast. Over 2 or 3 months, the ice will definitely melt. Therefore, for refrigerated transport, we can only build more ice houses along the route so that ships can replenish their consumed ice at any time on the way. Everyone understood your meaning as soon as you spoke and largely agreed with your analysis. Ice-chilled seafood was certainly good, but it was also the most troublesome of the 3 methods. Just building ice supply points along the route would be a considerable expense. However, Yu Fu, who had had his fill of seafood, was clearly not very enthusiastic about these minor endeavors, nor did he particularly approve of transporting fish back. So he said, "Chief, I don't think it's necessary to bother with canned sea fish or refrigerated transport. The journey is too long, and it's not cost-effective to transport it back. The cost is too high. With the money spent on transport, if our tribe members want to eat fish, they can easily catch them in nearby freshwater lakes or rivers. It's cheaper than eating sea fish, no matter how you look at it. If they really want to eat it, just having some dried fish for a taste would be enough. When we develop seagoing fishing vessels, the main thing is to supply the local area. Let's feed the people in the coastal prefectures and counties first. Then we can develop some specialized marine fisheries, such as specifically catching rare fish species or sea creatures with special value. Chief, on our first voyage we encountered a particularly large sea beast. That thing was twice as long as our 2-masted sailing ship. Its mouth, when opened, was as wide as a ship. It specialized in swallowing schools of fish, gulping down several thousand caddies of sea fish in one go. If we could catch that thing, maybe it would really have some special use. It's just a pity our ships are too small. Even the largest ship in our tribe now is only about the same size as that sea beast. Trying to subdue or capture such a behemoth with ships like that, I think it's a long shot." "Heh heh," you laughed, quite surprised. "You brat, you dare to take on such a large sea beast? Aren't you afraid of capsizing and feeding the fish?" "Afraid? Of course I'm afraid." Yu Fu seemed to have had a bit too much to drink, and his words loosened up, daring to blurt out any embarrassing incident. "Chief, you haven't seen with your own eyes how terrifying that thing is. The first time we saw it, everyone was clinging to the ship's railing, trembling, not even daring to breathe loudly, afraid that thing would flip our small boat with a flick of its tail and then make a snack out of us." As soon as these words were out, everyone present burst into laughter. Yu Fu didn't care, took a sip of wine, and continued to boast. "It's no shame for me to be afraid of that thing. You haven't seen it. When you do, you'll definitely be more cowardly than me. Besides, I'm afraid of it because our ship is small. If I had a big ship that wouldn't capsize no matter what, I'd be the first to lead people to find trouble with that big fellow. Maybe we could really bring it back." "That's right. If there was such a big ship, we'd all dare to go. Even if we couldn't catch it, we'd have to cut a few caddies of meat off it." Hearing their leader talk about hunting sea beasts, several of Yu Fu's captains immediately chimed in, egging him on. Niu Wei at the side was already feeling dizzy. It was his first time drinking alcohol. He hadn't even touched rice wine before, so his alcohol tolerance was really poor. Right now, he was leaning on the table, his head nodding, and it was uncertain when he might just slump over and fall asleep. Yunji, on the other hand, was whispering with Yu Fu about the sea beast, mainly Yunji asking and Yu Fu narrating animatedly. There was no helping it. He was simply too curious. Let alone never having seen such a large animal, Yunji had never even heard of one. If it weren't for the fact that even the chief seemed to believe it, he would definitely have thought Yu Fu was just spinning tall tales. You watched them with a smile, offering no opinion, but your mind was rapidly calculating the uses of whales. If there was indeed such a significant benefit, rigging up a whaling ship for a bit of fun wouldn't be out of the question. Of course, large ships still needed to be built, but there was no need to rush. The Han tribe could absolutely take it one step at a time, slowly but surely. Yu Fu had successfully opened the sea route to Bamboo Island. Whether it was building new port bases or sharing fishing boats with the Xin Tribe, the Han tribe needed a large number of small vessels, especially popular models like the two-masted sailboats. But they couldn't rely solely on the shipyard in Liuyang Prefecture for all these ships. That would slow down the progress of building large ships to a crawl. Therefore, your little scheme was to gradually subcontract the production. Orders for small boats. First, set up a shipyard at a coastal base and transfer some workers there. The old shipyard in Liuyang Prefecture would then focus on building the big ones, and incidentally research and develop new ship models. The new ship models would, naturally, still be primarily fishing vessels, and they had to be built larger to ensure that every voyage could return fully laden, making a fortune. To cram in as much cargo as possible, you initially set the target at a ship length of 80 meters, a beam of 16 meters, at least 6 masts, a molded depth of over 4 meters, and a full load displacement exceeding 2,000 tons, a veritable behemoth. Such a ship would be twice as large as the Han tribe's current biggest vessel. But compared to modern ocean-going fishing vessels, it would still be a mere little brother. However, you weren't in a hurry. One must eat rice, mouthful by mouthful. Taking too large a stride could lead to a pulled groin, metaphorically speaking. If the goal was set too high, all sorts of problems could drive you mad. If it couldn't be built, that was one thing. But if it was built and then met with disaster at sea, you'd be left crying against a pillar. Such a large ship, carrying several hundred people. If something went wrong, the Han tribe would effectively lose an entire county town. The Han tribe truly couldn't afford such a loss. Moreover, upgrading from small ships to large ships meant that the construction techniques for many connecting parts also had to be upgraded. At the very least, a large number of steel components would have to be clanged into place to ensure the hull's strength, preventing it from breaking apart under a large wave. Fortunately, the current coking plants and steel mills were already operating smoothly, and the Han tribe's main territory wasn't short on steel. Therefore, considering the raw material issue, the construction of large ships could only be carried out in the Han tribe's main territory. An 80-meter-long ship would require approximately 4,000 tall and sturdy oak or fir trees. If this were any other tribe, just felling, transporting, and processing the timber would exhaust them to the point of vomiting blood. It would be an absolutely catastrophic, massive undertaking. Only a super-large tribe like the Han tribe, coupled with an ample supply of livestock for transportation and tireless automatic sawmills, could possibly tackle this tough nut. As for the timber, you weren't too worried at the moment. The natural environment of this era was incredibly pristine, with lush primeval forests everywhere, practically free for the taking. The Han tribe had built over 200 ships, large and small so far, yet the surrounding mountains and forests still looked just as dense, showing no signs of depletion. Besides, forests have a way of self-repairing. As long as you didn't dig up their ancestral graves, tree roots, they would quickly grow lush and green again. While you were hunkered down in your home base, racking your brains and tearing your hair out over the Han tribe's shipbuilding ambitions, Zhuya was leading the remaining half of the envoy members. along with a large number of artisans left behind by Yufu's fleet, to kick off the manufacturing era on Bamboo Island with great fanfare. When Shuya first arrived in the Xin Tribe, he had patted his chest and promised to give the manufacturing technology for ink, brushes, paper, and inkstones to the Xin Tribe as a welcoming gift. This, of course, was something you had instructed him to do long ago. Now that the envoy had its own base on Bamboo Island, they officially began to impart knowledge and dispel confusion. The Xin Tribe attached great importance to this technological poverty alleviation, directly sending 5 elders to learn personally, like primary school students attending a lecture. Elder Qi, as the leader of the Xin Tribe's research and development team, was the main person responsible for receiving the technology this time. He even brought a contingent of the Xin Tribe's own artisans, who eagerly learned the techniques while assisting the envoy, conveniently solving the envoy's manpower shortage, a truly win-win situation. As for Elder Jin, who was specifically in charge of copper smelting and casting, he didn't have any specific tasks. He was purely sent by the Xin chieftain to audit the classes. He didn't need to learn any particular skill. He just wandered around the envoy's artisans all day, offering water here, chatting there. In reality, his pair of sharp little eyes never left the various tools in the artisan's hands, nor how those tools were used. Every day after observing, he would secretly go back and jot things down in a small notebook. Once he had understood all the tools, he would take the knowledge back and use copper alloys to create counterfeit versions, especially various woodworking tools, which were prime targets for his attention. Elder Ju, the only pro-Han faction, member among the Xin Tribe's Council of Elders, had volunteered to stay. His reason given to the Xin chieftain was also quite compelling. The Han tribe's envoy was undertaking large-scale construction, so he would proactively lead people to help, and incidentally, learn the Han tribe's advanced construction techniques. This way, he could build a magnificent house for the great chieftain in the future, which would be incredibly prestigious. The Xin chieftain already coveted the Han tribe's various technologies. Hearing Elder Ju's words, what more was there to say? He immediately waved his hand and approved. Also accompanying them were Elder Mi and Elder Du. These two weren't here to study ink, brushes, paper, and inkstones. They were here specifically to learn farming. When you had sent Shu Ya over, you had him bring a lot of seeds, mainly wheat, and peanuts along with a large pile of ramie seeds. Your little abacus was clattering away. You wanted to use these low-yield or inedible crops to encroach upon the Xin tribe's fertile land, making them create their own food crisis. Now, these strategic weapons, under your plan, were finally beginning to take root and sprout on Bamboo Island's soil. The ramie grew incredibly fast. In the sweltering steamer, like weather of the 8th and 9th months, the seeds, once sown, poked their little heads out of the ground in 2 days. Their growth rate was different every day, as if they were on steroids. However, for the Xin tribe to start producing their own linen cloth now was still a pipe dream. Firstly, the ramie hadn't fully matured yet. Secondly, being the first planting, the yield was also far too low. Not nearly enough raw material for weaving. However, this small difficulty couldn't deter the Xin tribe, who were eager to learn textile technology, nor could it deter the Han tribe envoy, who was eager to consume Bamboo Island's labor force. The two sides hit it off, each coming up with a way to solve the raw material problem to quickly complete the friendly transfer of textile technology. "Envoy Han," said Elder Qi, who was in charge of this technological exchange, rubbing his hands gleefully. "Since this ramie you mentioned still needs some time to grow, and we also need to gradually expand its cultivation, why don't we practice with other materials first, learn to spin thread and weave cloth? What do you think?" Shuya was a little curious. Could it be that this Xin tribe still had other fiber raw materials on hand and in considerable quantities? It wasn't. Surprising that Shuya thought this way. As far as he knew, the Xin tribe currently had no crops that could provide a large amount of fiber. Now that the other party's elder had proactively suggested it, how could he not be curious? Besides, the ramie you just planted, do you have other crops that can provide a large amount of textile raw materials? Shuya asked. We do, Elder Dao said with a smug look, grinning like a fox that had stolen a chicken. Has Envoy Han perhaps forgotten that our Xin Tribe once obtained Han Tribe's woolen cloth from the grasslands? Hehehehehe. Shuya slapped his forehead, speechless and looking to the heavens. He had been racking his brains lately about what crops to use as a substitute for ramie, and had completely forgotten about woolen cloth, casting it to the 9 clouds. However, since they were going to teach textiles anyway, adding wool spinning, technology wouldn't be a big deal. It would also conveniently give everyone something to do during the gap, while the ramie was still immature and troublesome to process, preventing them from getting bored to tears. All right, then it's settled. Shuya agreed readily. You will be responsible for organizing manpower to collect the raw materials, and our envoy will provide the machinery and artisans. I guarantee you'll master the techniques here in no time. Actually, weaving cloth is very simple. The technology transfer on Bamboo Island was proceeding vigorously. All sorts of good news flew like snowflakes to the Xin chieftain's ears, making him grin from ear to ear. Regardless of whether that troublesome cross-sea bridge could be built, his title of enlightened ruler of a generation was set in stone. If nothing else, the fact that the Xin tribe had achieved rocket-like leapfrog development under his leadership was enough to brag about for a lifetime. For instance, he was now already using high-tech items produced by his own tribe, such as writing brushes, ink sticks, and inkstones. Although paper hadn't been successfully made yet, he could already write and draw on bamboo slips with a brush. Compared to the previous laborious carving of characters, this was more than just a little bit convenient. With these domestically produced writing tools, one thing the Xin chieftain did every day without fail was to copy the Han rites and Han laws gifted by the Han tribe envoy, like a primary school student practicing calligraphy. The Xin chieftain had no ideological baggage about learning the Han tribe's script. In this era, there were no concepts of ethnicity or nation yet. Everyone was basically a bare-bottomed primitive, and tribes weren't all that different. Whoever had advanced things, you learned from them. There was absolutely no awareness of cultural preservation. Although the Xin tribe also had its own oracle bone script, the number of characters was pitifully small. Some were less like characters and more like symbols, completely lacking a system. They neither had the versatility of alphabetic scripts that could be arranged and combined in various ways, nor the exquisite structure of Chinese characters with their top, bottom, left, right, radicals, and components. Since the Han tribe's script was so awesome and could express anything, why be polite? Just learn it directly. Moreover, learning Chinese characters wasn't just about recognizing characters. It also allowed them to learn the Han tribe's advanced knowledge, such as tribal management experience, which was the main prize. Although the book Han Rites primarily discussed etiquette and norms, if you could truly digest it, you could discern the Han tribe's strict class divisions and how they cleverly used the system of enfeoffment by merit to control the common people, guiding their behavior through a complete set of promotion rules. It was as if they had completely figured out human psychology. For example, why was the Han tribe's technology so advanced? The Xin chieftain had been baffled by this before. But when he saw it recorded in the Han rites that anyone with practical inventions and creations could receive noble titles and rewards in the Han tribe, enjoy a higher social status than others, and also receive land grants directly linked to wealth, with such a huge temptation laid before them, and the promotion channel being legitimate, who wouldn't rack their brains to invent things for the tribe? If the Han tribe's technology developed slowly, that would truly be seeing a ghost. Of course, this was purely the Xin chieftain's beautiful misunderstanding. The reason the Han tribe had achieved such fruitful results today was entirely due to you alone pulling the cart and setting the pace. However, his understanding wasn't wrong. This was precisely the effect you wanted. If all the common people could clearly recognize this, that would be a truly great thing. Holy crap! so you can actually accelerate tribal development and control its direction by setting rules. Learn something new, learn something new. No wonder our Xin tribe is so lifeless with no vitality at all. Is it because our people have no ladder to climb? No matter how hard they work, they can only be the same as everyone else, so they've lost their ambition. While painstakingly learning Chinese characters, the Xin chieftain frantically absorbed the knowledge he needed from the Han rites, repeatedly pondering how to manage the tribe, almost to the point of obsession. As the saying goes, your position determines your perspective. Different professions naturally lead to different ways of looking at problems, and the conclusions drawn are vastly different. The Xin chieftain was indeed a talent. As the leader of a large tribe, he first saw the methods of tribal management in the Han rites. Most Han tribe students, however, were still at the stage of watching the excitement. This was the difference in perspective brought about by different positions. To give an analogy, if you asked a small merchant from the Han tribe to read the Han rites, he would definitely see business opportunities first. Oh dear, another festival is coming. What good things should I prepare for the festival? Looks like I need to stock up in advance. And those young lads about to graduate would only focus on the various elaborate rituals concerning marriage in the Han rites, and from them, fantasize about many indescribable scenes. This is the difference in perspective brought by status. Everyone's focus on the same thing is entirely different. Lately, the Xin chieftain felt as if he had found a treasure and was incredibly happy. When he was happy, everything tasted good. Having not seen him for a few weeks, he had put on a whole layer of fat. He also became increasingly open to the Han tribe envoys' various activities on Bamboo Island. Permissions he had been stingy about before were now generously approved. At least that was how it was for now. Because up to this point, the Xin chieftain hadn't discovered any ill intentions from the Han tribe towards them. He felt that the Han tribe had already laid its cards on the table. Why was the Han tribe so actively helping his tribe? Wasn't it because they wanted to monopolize the export trade of Bamboo Island's sea salt? Because among the many trades between the Han and Xin tribes, the only hard currency the Xin tribe could offer was glistening white salt. To obtain those advanced technologies and materials, the Xin tribe could only trade all the salt they produced each year. In this way, wouldn't the connection between the Xin tribe and the grasslands naturally be severed? Regardless of whether this was the truth, the Xin chieftain felt he had already seen through the Han tribe's strategy to cut off Bamboo Island's connection with the grasslands, coupled with the intelligence that the Han tribe was building fortifications and stationing troops in the grasslands this year. Considering all these circumstances, it wasn't difficult to guess that the Han tribe was planning something big in the grasslands next. However, whatever mischief the Han tribe was up to had nothing to do with their Xin tribe. Even if it did, the Xin chieftain didn't want to get involved, because he felt that the Han tribe's leader had already given him enough hints. The Han tribe was willing to exchange technology for the Xin tribe's non-interference. As long as he didn't meddle in grassland affairs, he could get an opportunity for rapid development. The Xin chieftain was, of course, happy to watch the show. Not seizing such a good opportunity would make him a fool. He believed this was an overt scheme you had laid out, and anyone who didn't take the bait was an idiot. Of course, these were all just his own conjectures. You, in any case, would admit nothing, only needing to proceed step by step according to your established plan. On the other hand, Modu, who had lost the Xin tribe as an important partner, was having a very hard time. Without the Xin tribe, they lost a large supply of white salt and an important channel for obtaining metal weapons. Ever since the Xin tribe's merchant caravans disappeared from the grasslands, even bamboo arrow shafts had become a rarity throughout the entire steppe. Herdsmen dared not easily shoot arrows, fearing waste, because selling arrow shafts was the Xin tribe merchant caravan's exclusive business. The Han tribe didn't sell that stuff at all. Now, if the nomadic tribes in the grasslands wanted to make new arrows, they could only search for materials all over the world and make them themselves. This gave them terrible headaches, to the point where even the price of arrow-making materials in the grasslands had risen. and it was a seller's market. You couldn't buy them even if you had money. You, of course, didn't care about these trivial matters. You would be happy if all the herdsmen in the entire grassland were disarmed. It was even better if the herdsmen couldn't buy arrows. It would save them from roaming around outside every day. You only cared about your own business now. As for other things, you couldn't be bothered. The new city established by the Han tribe by the grassland lake was already taking shape. After several months of intensive construction, at least the inner city was completed. The artisans, slaves, and troops who had arrived earlier had now all moved into the inner city, finally able to sleep without constant fear, their sense of security soaring. With the completion of the inner city of the new grassland city, this city, currently the furthest from the Han tribe's main territory, was also officially designated as a prefecture, Qimingxing Prefecture. This was the name you gave the new grassland city, and one could tell its meaning at a glance. This was a new, gushing source of income for the Han tribe. Business in Qimingxing Prefecture was booming, because they sold essential daily necessities that the herdsmen urgently needed. Moreover, because the Xin Tribe had withdrawn from the grassland market, this business was the only one of its kind in the entire grassland. You want to buy from someone else? No way. Monopoly business is just that domineering. If you don't like it, lump it. Furthermore, the Han tribe also took this opportunity to officially launch its own monetary system, beginning to try to use this thing called money to control all the nomadic tribes, making them obediently listen. Promoting this thing called currency was both difficult and easy. What the Han tribe implemented wasn't purely fiat currency, because copper and silver coins themselves had value, unlike paper money, which relied purely on credit. Paper money was true fiat currency. Without a strong government and countless guarantees backing it, banknotes were just a pile of waste paper, too stiff even to wipe your bottom with. Coupled with your various clever maneuvers, the Han tribe's currency was promoted in the grasslands with incredible smoothness, practically like an unstoppable force. Copper and silver coins inherently possess their own value. Even if not used as money, they could be fashioned into tools or utensils. This was their intrinsic worth. Therefore, when the Han tribe used this currency for transactions, the herdsmen of the grasslands didn't exhibit strong resistance. After all, it was tangible and reassuring. Of course, there were difficulties, but you had anticipated them all in advance and had prepared corresponding solutions for these potential problems, making it foolproof. How could one make herdsmen, who had never encountered coins before, willingly use currency for transactions? This was a big question, but to achieve this, one first had to establish the credibility of the currency issuer in the minds of the herdsmen, making them believe you weren't playing them for fools. Regarding this point, your first big move was building a city. Yes, you heard right, building a city. These two things, which seemed completely unrelated, were actually very closely linked in your eyes. In fact, the Han tribe's currency had been developed long ago and was circulating very well in the Han tribe's main territory, like tap water. So the question arose, why wasn't it brought to the grasslands for promotion earlier? Why wait until the city was built to start using currency? The intricacies here ran deep. Put yourself in their shoes. If you were a herdsman and encountered a group of strangers who popped up from who knows where, claiming to be a Han tribe merchant caravan, wanting to exchange their shiny metal discs for the cattle, horses, and sheep you had painstakingly raised. These metal discs couldn't be eaten or drunk and were useless in your hands. You certainly wouldn't want to trade with them. You would rather exchange your livestock for some salt, cloth, or iron pots at a low price, even if you took a small loss, because these things were practical. White salt could be eaten, cloth could be made into clothes, and iron pots could be used for cooking. Why would you choose to exchange them for some useless scrap metal? Are you out of your mind? But now the situation was different. You heard that a group of people calling themselves the Han tribe had set up a large compound in the grasslands, specializing in selling various daily necessities. Through introductions from neighbors and acquaintances, you prepared to take your cattle, horses, and sheep to exchange for some goods. When you got there, however, those people calling themselves the Han Tribe said that they only accepted currency for transactions here. You felt those metal pieces had little value and didn't want to trade with them, preferring a simple and direct barter. But those people insisted that transactions must be made with currency, and they patted their chests, guaranteeing that you could exchange these currencies for all sorts of goods there. If you couldn't, you were welcome to come find trouble with them any time. Under the other party's persistent persuasion, you decided to exchange a little currency to test the waters. Unexpectedly, it worked quite well. Coupled with the other parties, guarantee you decided to hold on to some currency for now. Anyway, their home was right here, they couldn't possibly run away. If something went wrong, you'd just go to their door and cause trouble. Your goal was to create this kind of psychology in the herdsmen. My home is right here. I say these currencies work, and they definitely work. If there's a problem, you come to my house and settle the score with me. What? You're worried I'll run off with the money? Nonsense. I've spent so much manpower, resources, and money to build such a large compound here. Do you think I'd run away because of your paltry sum? Take your money and scram, don't delay my business. This was the crucial role the new city played in establishing the credit of the Han tribe's currency. What was the new city? It was actually the Han tribe's fixed asset in the grasslands. You were, in effect, mortgaging this fixed asset under the herdsmen's noses to gain their trust in the Han tribe's currency, making them believe you weren't just trying to pull a fast one. This was just the first step. Even so, most herdsmen still preferred barter, direct, convenient, without worrying about being cheated, and less troublesome. So how could they be made to willingly choose currency transactions? Your solution to this problem was to set up two markets. One was a livestock trading market, specifically for exporting currency, using currency to purchase livestock from the herdsmen. The other was a department store market, which had everything, mainly daily necessities. To buy things here, you had to pay with coins. One in, one out. This formed a virtuous cycle of currency and goods, allowing the entire market environment to stabilize and flourish. Firstly, there were the potential troubles herdsmen might encounter when buying things. For example, he fancies a pair of leather boots or an iron pot in Kaiyuan Prefecture's department store and wants to trade his cow for them. But he feels it's too much of a loss to exchange a whole cow for these items, and the other party doesn't want a cow but prefers a flock of sheep. What to do in this situation? Very simple. The herdsman could first go to the livestock trading market next door, sell his cow, and exchange it for an equivalent value in currency. Then he could use this currency to buy the leather boots and iron pot he wanted from the department store. And the merchant who wanted a flock of sheep could take this money to the livestock trading market next door and get the sheep he desired. Both parties are happy, perfect. From this perspective, currency served the roles of value preservation and transaction refinement, making trade more flexible and convenient. No matter what you brought, you could eventually exchange it for what you wanted without suffering a loss. Even if there was a price difference, you would receive an equivalent amount of currency as compensation, honest with young and old alike. This was your second step in promoting currency. In fact, by this stage, the credit of the currency was basically established. At the very least, the herdsmen were beginning to willingly try using currency for transactions. However, they still maintained their vigilance regarding long-term holding of currency. After all, people's hearts are unfathomable. Who knew if you would change your mind? What if this money suddenly became worthless? What if this money suddenly couldn't be exchanged for anything? What then? No, I can't hold currency. After exchanging for currency, I must spend it immediately. While the Han tribe hasn't changed its mind yet, I'll exchange all my currency for the things I need first, to be safe. This was the true inner thought of many herdsmen. And your third step in promoting currency was actually very simple and crude. Stockpiling. Goods, no matter how many things you want to buy, as long as you come with money, I will sell them to you in full, without hesitation. The first time, you spent all your money, got what you wanted, and felt pleased. The second time, you were still uneasy, spent all your money again, bought a pile of things and felt a little more at ease. The third time, a month later, you came with money to buy things again, and the Han tribe still sold them to you in full, with excellent service. At this point, you would slowly start to feel at ease holding currency. Although it might not be much at first, this was definitely a good sign. A single spark can start a prairie fire. Only by this stage could currency be considered truly promoted. In the grasslands, the herdsmen began to acknowledge that currency had value. They started to hold large amounts of currency, storing it as wealth. Even among herdsmen themselves, small-scale transactions would be conducted using currency. Only in this way could the Han tribe's currency achieve true economic control in the grasslands, firmly binding these unruly nomadic tribes to their war chariot.